All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're here to present to you a webinar on the topic of having an AI checklist, what to know, what to ask, and how to see ROI in community-based care with the tools that you do decide to utilize. I know that AI is just the new hot thing everyone's talking about today, so we have a couple of great presenters here to educate you on this topic, hopefully provide you with some information on what you need to look for as you're shopping through products or thinking about implementing a tool for your use. And so we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today and for our guest presenters to be here today. Before I turn it over to the two of them, just a couple reminders about our webinars. We do record these sessions. They will be available to you after the session is over. You can rewatch the video if you'd like. Please use the Q&A function for any of your questions. And if you also, you can access the links to the slide deck and also to a checklist in the Q&A. I've posted both of those links in there for you. We also have a couple of polls we'd love to have folks participate in, so I'll be launching those and then we'll be closing down the chat shortly. And so with that, I'm going to turn this over to our two guest speakers today. I'm going to turn it over to Linda Scott and to Bianca Justo. With that, thank you so much.
Thanks, Denise. Hi, everyone. I'm Bianca Justo. I lead go-to-market efforts at Patrium Health, where we work closely with home health and hospice providers to deliver AI-powered documentation and QA tools that improve efficiency and care quality. My background is in digital innovation and operational strategy. Before joining Patrium, I worked as a management consultant at Ernst & Young, helping launch and scale new technologies. I've also been very passionate about the healthcare space for many years, so I love building solutions that truly support frontline clinicians and make care delivery smoother and more scalable. My role at Patrium encompasses pilot operations and customer onboarding, so my goal is to make sure that working with us feels like an extension of your team. I'm joined today by my colleague and our clinical expert, Linda Scott.
Thank you, Bianca. Thanks, Denise, and hello, everyone today. Very happy to be with you to talk about artificial intelligence in home care. I'm a registered nurse, more than 35 years of home and community-based care experience. I lead clinical quality and customer success at Patrium Health. My background includes all aspects of home care management. And in my career, I've experienced the growing interest in home care, the ever increasing and complex regulations and demands for documentation, and the operational challenges faced by home healthcare staff and agencies. So in my current role at Patrium, I'm working directly with clinicians, QA teams, and agency leadership to ensure that our technology fits into real clinical workflows and adds value without burden.
Great, thanks, Linda. So before we dive in, I want to acknowledge that we're speaking to an audience that understands the real challenges facing home health and hospice agencies today. You're dealing with increasing regulatory scrutiny, staffing shortages, documentation burdens, and margin pressures, all while trying to maintain the highest quality of care. Now, AI isn't a magic solution, but when implemented thoughtfully, it can be a powerful tool to help address those issues. So today's discussion is timely because we're seeing a shift in how regulators and industry leaders view AI. It's not about implementing technology for its own sake. It's about strategic implementation that addresses real needs while maintaining compliance and quality. Now, we've gained insights for this presentation today through our own CHAP verification process and also our conversations with our partner agencies. And what we think makes today's session different is our focus on practical implementation rather than theoretical possibilities. So we'll address the real concerns agencies have. How do you ensure accuracy? What about security and compliance? And then how do you evaluate vendors to ensure that they deliver real value? Now, today's agenda, and I think I saw some folks in the chat couldn't see the slides. I'm having a similar issue, so maybe it's a Microsoft Teams platform issue, but we'll make it through. So today's agenda, here's what we'll be covering. We'll start with an AI primer to define key terms. Then Linda will discuss why now is the moment for AI adoption. From there, we'll dive into emerging AI technologies shaping our industry, followed by examples of AI use cases. So how AI creates smarter starts in admissions, and then everyday efficiency in clinical notes. We'll spend a significant amount of time on the voices of concern, addressing risks and offering up solutions on ways you might mitigate them. And in that section, we'll give a high-level overview of our AI vendor checklist that you can leverage during conversations with potential AI partners. Finally, we'll provide you with an implementation roadmap to tie these features to measurable outcomes, and we'll wrap up with key takeaways and answer any questions that have been posted to the Q&A chat. So one housekeeping item before we move on, the chat will be closed from here on out. We initially had it open in order to collect some responses to those polling questions. So maybe Denise or Nora, would you mind closing those polls now so we can review the results before we move on?
And Bianca, you should be able to see those in the chat if you want to take a look.
Great. Yep, I can see. So it looks like we've got a number of folks who looks like the majority of folks are concerned about either privacy and security risks or regulatory compliance. Yes, indeed, very, very pertinent. We'll speak to ways you can mitigate those risks later on. And then it looks like a lot of folks on the call today, in responses to the first question, have not started or are currently evaluating AI options. So I think this is going to be really helpful because we do start with a broad overview of the AI landscape, key terminology, that sort of thing. But a good chunk also have a pilot program in progress. So maybe you can take away some of the things we covered today and talk to the vendor that you're working with to see if there's any gaps that need to be filled. So with that, I will get started with our AI primer. So we want to make sure that we're all speaking the same language. AI has become a catch-all term, and you've probably seen vendors claim that their solutions are AI powered without much explanation. So understanding the foundational concepts is crucial for asking the right questions. Now, when we talk about AI, what we're really talking about is technology that can learn and make decisions the way people do, or at least try to. So it's not just about automation, it's about tools that can recognize patterns and adapt over time to support smarter decision making. Now, in healthcare, that might mean voice systems that understand what's being said in real time, or maybe predictive models that help flag risks before they become problems. So I'll first cover some of the different types of artificial intelligence. So machine learning, which is also known as analytical AI, has been around for quite a while. And this excels at analyzing existing data to identify patterns and make predictions. So maybe like risk stratification for hospital readmissions or analyzing trends in your quality metrics. It works with structured data to produce specific outputs. So think like scores or classifications. Next is generative AI or Gen AI. So that's gotten a lot of attention in recent years. Instead of just analyzing data, it creates new content. It generates new content. So when a clinician speaks naturally, generative AI might convert that speech into structured documentation that meets regulatory requirements. Now, within the Gen AI category are large language models, LLMs. So these are specifically designed to understand and generate human language. They can grasp medical terminology and clinical context. So they can turn a natural conversation into a compliant OASIS assessment or visit note. Next, let's cover some additional concepts that will come into play when evaluating AI vendors and implementing AI tools. So I'll say AI refers to algorithms or models that work quietly behind the scenes to analyze data, generate insights, or automate tasks. Now, what clinicians and staff interact with day to day is the application layer. So this is the user interface that takes the outputs from the complex AI algorithms and molds them into simple, usable features. So whether that's voice capture, clinical suggestions, or predictive alerts, AI is what's powering it in the background. And I guess the takeaway is that AI technology is mostly invisible, while the application interface or the application layer is what feels intuitive and supportive, much like all of the other digital tools and apps that you're used to. Now, none of this works in a silo. APIs, or application programming interfaces, are bridges that allow AI tools to connect with your existing systems like your EHR. APIs enable seamless connections that make sure everything syncs up and your workflow stays efficient. So as some of you might already know, the HIPAA High-Tech Act is pushing electronic health record systems to make their data available to other software vendors via APIs, and that's super important for interoperability. However, some are more advanced and easier to work with in this regard than others. Now, crucially, these technologies are only as good as the data that they work with. So it brings up a fundamental principle that we touched on a lot in our discussions with CHAP. It's garbage in, garbage out. If your data quality is poor or your workflows are inconsistent, even the most sophisticated AI is going to have a hard time delivering results. So I'll pause here to take a second and reflect on what you might have heard of as the black box concern. Modern AI systems in healthcare, especially, are increasingly focused on transparency. So an AI should be able to explain its reasoning in terms that a clinician can understand and validate. So that human oversight component is critical. You'll hear us say this a lot today. AI should be providing drafts and suggestions, but the clinician or the staff member always maintains responsibility for validating and signing off on the final content. So we'll circle back to this again when we discuss risks. For now, I'll hand it over to Linda to take us forward.
All right, thanks, Bianca. So let's pause here and ask, why now? Why is AI gaining so much traction in home healthcare right now? We're seeing a perfect storm of regulatory evolution and intense industry pressures. Why now isn't just about technology becoming available. It's about a fundamental shift in how we all view artificial intelligence in healthcare. We're all familiar with the imbalance in the supply of healthcare providers and the numbers of patients who need home healthcare. AI can enhance productivity and performance for all staff, allowing care for more people. Tools which delight clinical staff will support retention, another cost impact. Decreasing costs of AI, along with increasing capabilities, have made looking at AI for us in home health very feasible. So we take a look at our timeline here. You can see some of the perfect storms starting back in 2000, OASIS data collection, prospective payment, value-based payment, PDGM, the regular and increasingly stringent regulatory and reimbursement pressures, which don't exactly follow clinical training. And finally, we've got some pretty recent CMS guidance supporting the adoption of AI to reduce administrative burdens. So if you're wondering if this is a compliant option, the answer is increasingly yes, provided the right safeguards are in place. And we'll be talking about some of those. These types of shifts have resulted in demand in home health for AI. And the newness of these applications amidst the complex backdrop is where CHAP's verification process becomes so important. Through the verification process, CHAP has developed frameworks for evaluating AI solutions against compliance and quality standards. It's comprehensive. They test with real clinical scenarios in mind, including intentional discrepancies, to see if the system can catch errors. This is happening along the day-to-day reality of industry pressures we are all feeling. Paperwork, the burden of documentation, and how that may be contributing to clinician burnout. Are they being pressed too hard to do too much in not enough time? Staffing shortages, we mentioned this. People are leaving the industry, maybe not enough people are coming in. And then finally, the cost pressures. Reimbursement continues to not go up. And our costs in home health are mostly labor, and we can't pay our clinicians less. So we've got to find efficiencies. And also, we've got to maintain patient quality and patient satisfaction. We know this is becoming an increasingly prioritized business imperative in the wake of value-based payment. AI tools are emerging not as a luxury, but as a foundational infrastructure tool to survive and grow. So here's a little bit of what we're seeing in terms of emerging trends. These are things that are actually happening in clinical settings today and beginning to scale. Real-time AI. We've been talking about point-of-care documentation for 20 plus years now, and real-time AI is going to deliver it. It's a possibility of having a personal assistant you're talking to on the go. You can ask questions. Please tell me about my next patient. You can add detail about these pieces of information I left out of my prior assessment. No need to log in, no need to navigate tabs, no need to wait. It's immediate, hands-free support that keeps clinicians focused on care and on their patient. Agentic AI systems. Think of these as autonomous virtual assistants. They perform routine tasks automatically. These might be things like rescheduling visits, reordering supplies. They might be administrative tasks, but they're complex and they require accessing multiple systems or websites at once. And until now, that's been a challenging process to automate. On-device AI. This is a tool that runs on local devices. It does not require an internet connection. Perfect for home health, where we often find our patients have insufficient or no internet connection and or no cellular connection and so on. Not being able to connect to your record to document or obtain information is frustrating and inefficient. So the ability to collect information on the device and then connect and upload when the internet's available is a strategy that will help mitigate that issue. And then finally, or close to end, we've got self-learning systems. These are systems that continuously improve. They learn from their interactions with your staff and any corrections that are made on data changes and continually improving and updating without manual reprogramming. They adopt to your agency's specific patterns. So if you make a correction within the tool, perhaps you give it some information about what a particular acronym means in your agency. Going forward, that acronym will always be spelled out. You won't have to do it again. And finally, Bianca mentioned a little bit about this, but this has promise for us. In trying to be sure that we're getting the right services to the right patient at the right time, we have to think ahead and flag potential risks. Predictive insights show a lot of opportunity for the use of AI in flagging potential risks. Perhaps we've seen a lot of notes with some subtle patterns of gait changes or the patient's more slow about things. Maybe AI then would raise that to the attention of the staff before an incident happens. So let's get into some really high impact applications for AI in home health care. I want to start with the intake process, collecting all the information about your new patient and getting set up to that initial assessment is often highly manual and time-consuming, but AI tools can transform it. Smart documentation capture, automatic extraction, feed it your paper packet of referral information, and the system will extract key information from the referral source, populate your referral, provide a clinical summary to staff. This can cut processing time by almost half. Manual keying can be a thing of the past. Eligibility verification. Again, this is going to various websites, comparing data, collecting facts for approval by people with minimal effort, 24/7, reducing delays, making things happen faster. And then outreach. We can have the system contact our staff directly or prompt staff to make those contacts. That allows us to make sure that our patients know we're coming. They get a little peace of mind by knowing what to expect. And also, we can prevent costly mistakes, like sending our nurse out to the patient's home address when they've actually gone home with somebody else. These types of metrics speak for themselves. Speeding things up can increase referral partner confidence by 32%. If you can say yes pretty quickly and keep on moving and get your patients admitted timely because of reduced processing speed and enhanced efficiency in documentation, then you're going to be the go-to referral source. Everybody's going to send their referrals to you. And that is how your revenue can increase. Additionally, AI-enabled admissions can spur an uptick in patient satisfaction. If clinicians have this information in advance, as we've discussed, they're coming into patients being able to share a little bit of what we know about you, which was given to us by the doctor or the hospital, and show that they are prepared and up to date for information about the patient, that they were coordinating with those other people, and they didn't act like they didn't know anything by asking all the same questions for an umpteenth time. So patients will be perceived as caring, and your HCAP scores are going up from the first visit. We've got a little bar chart here that shows us some statistics. Traditional ways, manual keying, manual verification versus AI-enhanced activities in our intake and admissions process. And you can see that we can save a tremendous amount of time at intake and start of care by using AI processes to reduce the hours spent across this, leading to a much faster start of care. And the last thing I'll mention here is the possibility for AI to deliver some route optimization scheduling capabilities. AI can know all the patients that are to be seen today by who, if there's any clinical requirements about schedule, and lay out the route the most efficient way. All things that can keep clinicians from burning out and everyone's day to move a little more smoothly. Here's some everyday efficiencies, our clinical notes. This is the thing we kind of do the most of. And there's a lot of meaningful ways that AI can reduce the administrative burden of daily documentation and help reduce clinician burnout. Voice capture and transcription. This is real-time AI. The clinician is interacting with the patient as they always do, talking to them. They speak as they train and teach and assess. And so the recording captures that conversation and turns it into structured data. It can summarize key findings from the visit, place structured data into the right places that's required in the EHR. It can capture missing data, discrepancy data. This doesn't agree with that. this can't be possible based on what you said over there, and can use discipline-specific templates for clinicians, which account for the discipline and how they might approach the patient condition and provide suggestions. For example, if the assessment is revealing unintentional weight loss, for example, and a reduced appetite has been seen for a few visits, the app might suggest that we work on some nutritional support tactics on reducing nutrition risk for our patient. We're seeing strong indicators across the market that AI tools like these can significantly reduce documentation time by 40% on average, but by as much as 90%, which can translate into 20% more patient visits per week. Providers also report higher compliance with documentation standards. Notes are more complete and more timely. These numbers definitely vary by agency and implementation phase, but it reflects the general trends we're seeing from industry pilots, early adopters, and how things might play out across your agency. Hopefully, the next few slides are going to give you some more ideas about how we think about AI in the home health space. Let me give this back to Bianca for that.
Linda, before we move past this page, I did just want to comment on something that I'll touch on again, but that's regarding some of these voice capture and transcription tools. I did just want to call out that there is a big change management aspect to some of these tools. So it's not just about deploying the technology, but also about training your staff so that they are using the tools effectively and they're getting the most out of them. So the key is to provide the right support early on, training, examples, tip sheets, so that the clinicians feel confident using the tool in real time. And you want to have a vendor that will support you in that. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. That's concerns about AI. So whenever new technology enters clinical settings, especially one as sensitive as documentation, it is natural to have questions and skepticism. And what's important is not to dismiss those concerns, but to name them, understand them, and address them thoughtfully. So we've grouped them into 6 categories, each with a risk and at least one, probably more, corresponding solutions. So the first is accuracy concerns. Can we trust AI to get clinical documentation right? This is one that we hear a lot from the clinicians that we work with. And let's be clear, AI is not perfect. It can misinterpret context, especially if an input is maybe vague or incomplete. So for example, saying something like "she's stable now" might be interpreted differently depending on maybe the previous entries for that patient record or visit note. So that's why we've marked this as a high risk area. And it goes beyond simple transcription. So during CHAP verification, they tested if our system could catch conflicts between different OASIS items, like M items and GG items, which have different rules and can impact value-based purchasing outcomes. So the goal is not blind automation, but clinician-assisted AI. Tools should offer drafts, not final submissions. And clinicians need to be the ones to validate, maybe adjust, and then sign off on the documentation. And I'll say this now, I'll repeat it a number of times, feedback loops should let the AI learn and improve over time. So the solution here is to look for vendors with these clinician validation workflows, and also ones that have active machine learning systems that can update based on the real world use of the tool. Number 2, which a lot of you called out in the poll as important to you, is privacy and security risks. Is our PHI secure? This concern is both real and non-negotiable. You are handling highly sensitive patient data, and AI tools often do involve cloud storage, or audio capture or third-party infrastructure. This even goes beyond HIPAA. It includes things like legal discovery. So where ambient voice recordings, if they're part of the tool, might be considered admissible evidence. So we learned of a case where recordings were subpoenaed to fact check documentation against what was actually said during a visit. So that's why it is super critical to establish clear data retention policies and ensure that staff understand whether those recordings are considered part of the patient record. Agencies should also provide consistent training so staff know how to document appropriately and reduce the legal risk. Other things you can do are insist on vendors who provide a BAA, a business associate agreement. You might want to look for vendors who use end-to-end encryption. Actually, that's probably a table stakes minimum requirement. You want vendors who offer either on-premise server options or at a minimum US-based servers. And in general, you want a vendor who is transparent about their data use and retention policies. So you can ask them directly, is my data used to train models? What is the policy around that? So you should have a clear understanding of if and how data from your use of the tool is used. If there's a mobile app, ensure that they have biometric authentication. So that's requiring a fingerprint or a Face ID to open the app, just like you might see on a banking app on your phone. Number 3 is implementation complexity. So how disruptive is this going to be? Tech rollouts often fail not because of the tech, but because of workflow disruption. So the real challenge is people and process. A common pitfall is requiring double documentation. So if your clinicians need to log on to another portal or download some other files, or maybe what I like to call swivel chairing between your EHR tool and the AI tool, it's not going to stick. So the solution here is to choose vendors with really effective EHR integrations. You also like to have a vendor that includes a phased rollout plan. So we'll expand on this concept of a phased rollout in a few slides. And then also it's really nice if they can provide some dedicated implementation support, because at the end of the day, even the best AI tool won't succeed if it creates more work for your team. So the implementation has to feel seamless. Look for partners who understand that success depends just as much on change management and workflow alignment as it does on the fancy technology. And the smoother the rollout, the faster you'll see real impact. Next, we have organizational resistance. So that might be resistance from clinicians or other staff members. You might ask, will my team actually use this? And let's acknowledge something. Clinicians are under a lot of pressure, and they've seen tech solutions that promised to help and didn't. So it's fair for them to be skeptical. Some worry that AI means management is watching me, or worse, that my job is being automated. But the reality is that AI is designed to augment, not replace, your workforce. And communication should be transparent. That is the goal, to support them, not to monitor them or replace them. Sometimes it's as simple as semantics. We've found that calling our tool a documentation assistant instead of maybe an AI tool, it reduces anxiety because it's using terms that they're already familiar with. Other solutions, including end users in the tool selection process. So as you're demoing tools and you're sitting through vendor presentations, maybe bring in some clinicians or ask the vendor to demo the tool for a second or third time, just to get the clinical buy-in in the implementation of the tool at your agency. Another thing we've worked well post-implementation is sharing the data, the outcomes of using the tool with the entire user base at your agency. So showing the clinicians or QA staff the time that's being saved, showing them the fewer rework requests as a result of tool usage can maybe help some of the stragglers see, oh wow, like this is actually helping. Maybe I should put in the effort to use the tool more often. And then the last example I'll give here is to consider using pilot groups. And these typically end up being your champion users. So often it's your tech savvy nurses or QA staff, and they can help build internal buy-in. So you want someone who's open to new tools, someone who's trusted by their peers, and someone who's really willing to give the honest feedback, both on what's working and what's not, so that you can iterate and improve during the pilot before rolling it out more broadly. Number 5 is generic notes. So some look at AI and think this just feels like copy-paste automation. And that concern is valid, especially with some of the basic or one-size-fits-all tools that might lack the nuance and patient specificity needed for strong clinical documentation. Generic documentation, it not only puts you at risk for compliance issues, it also undermines your ability to demonstrate the individualized care that value-based payment models require. So AI tools need to support, not strip away, all of that nuance that justifies the visit intensity or that supports the quality scores and ultimately impacts reimbursement. So the solution is extensive customization of clinical documentation templates, terminologies, and workflow logic to reflect your agency's specific patient populations and protocols. So look for AI that supports, again, these patient-specific clinical documentation templates. For example, a physical therapy patient is going to need different documentation, different information captured than a skilled nursing patient might. You can look for AI that supports customizable vocabularies and terminology, what Linda mentioned earlier. So maybe you'll want to give them a list of acronyms or terms that are specific to your region or your agency. Another example here is that some agencies like to use different shorthand, maybe for assistive devices or wound types, and the AI can be trained to recognize and document those correctly. And then again, a feedback loop. So a feedback loop to evolve with your population and your care model. So example here, a hospice agency. They flagged that their early AI drafts omitted psychosocial context. So their vendor added a field for family dynamics after getting that feedback. And that resulted in improved quality of the documentation going forward. So that's the feedback loop that I'm talking about. And finally, regulatory shifts and compliance uncertainty. So a lot of you might be asking, will CMS or surveyors accept the usage of AI tools? And the short answer is yes, if done right. Surveyors are definitely asking about AI tools during visits. So you need to be prepared to demonstrate not just the technical safeguards, but that your staff have been trained on your policies. So work with vendors that meet the CHAP, Medicare, and HIPAA documentation standards. Work with vendors who can provide audit-ready output formats from their tool, and who are prepared to support you through a future survey or ADR. There's also vendors who are willing to work with you on policy revisions that might take their tool into consideration. The regulatory landscape is evolving. So you want to work with partners who are committed to maintaining compliance. And usually this looks like flexible contracts so that they're adapting to the changing requirements. So in summary, is AI perfect? No. But when it is implemented thoughtfully with strong controls, a feedback loop, and clinician-first design, it can mitigate the risk, not add to it. Now, before we wrap up this section, we'll go to the next slide and preview our AI checklist. So this is a practical resource that many agencies should find helpful, because when you're evaluating an AI tool, especially one that touches clinical documentation, there are a lot of promises, but not always a lot of transparency. And to navigate those challenges, you need to evaluate vendors thoroughly. So we created this checklist to help home health and hospice leaders like yourselves navigate the vendor conversation with clarity and confidence. The checklist has been enhanced with insights from our own chat verification process, as well as our conversations with agencies who use our tool. So it's designed to help you focus on what truly matters and maybe even avoid some costly surprises after signing a contract. Now, the full checklist of questions is located at the end of this document, which will be shared after the webinar concludes, or you can access it now using the QR code on the screen. Now, I'll run through the checklist categories really fast. We're not going to go through every question, but the categories mirror all of the risk mitigation recommendations that we had on the prior slide. So first, comprehensive security, right? You want to go beyond a simple BAA, ask about biometric authentication for mobile apps, ask about the vendor's procedures for remote data wipes and legal discovery. Number two, regulatory compliance considerations. How do their tools integrate with your QAPI program? Have they undergone third-party validation like a CHAP verification? Next is the EHR integration and workflow disruption. Are they able to populate existing templates? Are clinicians going to be jumping between multiple systems? Does the tool have an offline mode in case your clinicians are working in a place with low cell reception? Customization. Don't just take their word for it. Ask how they test OASIS scoring accuracy, especially for those revenue critical items like GG scores. Number 5 is training for staff. The vendor should be a partner in your agency's successful adoption of the tool. So do they provide change management support and help you develop an internal champion user program? And then lastly, ongoing improvement. Is the AI continuously trained on your agency's feedback? And will you have visibility to how the AI is being implemented and improved over time? So last thing I'll say is that this checklist goes beyond just evaluating vendors. It's also a tool for just setting those clear expectations once you have a partner that you're working with. So as you introduce AI into your workflows, policy documentation becomes key. So that's why it's at the center of this summary here. It gives you a way to clarify how each of these areas will be handled. The best vendors won't just check the boxes, they'll help you shape internal policies that align with your goals and keep your team protected. A key takeaway, be wary of a tool that claims to be perfect. Instead, look for a partner that is transparent about what they can provide and committed to evolving with your team. So now that we've talked about how AI works, we've addressed some of these common concerns, let's focus on something else that really matters to most leadership teams, which is how do we implement this effectively and what kind of impact can we expect? So I'll walk through both, starting with the implementation roadmap. When agencies struggle with AI adoption, it's rarely because the tool doesn't work. It's usually because the rollout wasn't structured or didn't involve the right people at the right time. So here's the 4-phase roadmap we recommend. First, strategic planning. This phase is all about alignment. So first, what are you trying to achieve? Is it time savings? Is it better audit scores? Is it reducing the weekend documentation time that your clinicians are spending? You want to make sure that AI is solving a problem. Don't just pursue it because it's fashionable or trendy. You should be setting some clear goals, maybe picking 3 to 5 KPIs that you'll measure. And we also suggest identifying a steering committee. So that might include clinical, QA, and IT and operations voices. So not just one department. For some tools, it might even be good to include a billing and finance if they're going to be involved in the workflows. Don't let AI be just someone's side project, right? It needs executive sponsorship and clinical ownership if it's going to stick. Otherwise, it's going to be a waste of your resources. Next is phased rollout. So this is where the tool gets introduced, but in a controlled and supported way. So start with a pilot group, maybe 3 to 5 clinicians, depending on the size of your agency, who are, respected amongst their peers and who are open to new technology. Run the pilot for maybe 2 to 4 weeks. So with weekly feedback loops so that there's quick iterations on any workflow considerations or tool changes that might need to take place. Use what you learned during those weekly sessions to fine-tune the tool before scaling it out to the full team. One fun fact, an agency we worked with had their pilot nurses give us feedback directly in a shared chat channel. So that really sped up the time that we were able to respond to their concerns or questions. Next, number 3, training and support. So this is where a lot of vendors might fall short. You want more than just a 1-hour demo. It's great if they can build role-specific trainings, because like intake staff might not need the same depth as QA reviewers, who might not need the same depth as clinicians, for example. You might create a super user program so that peer support happens internally, right? Your vendor might not always be available to answer questions, but if you have a clinician that is that super user, maybe they can address another clinician's question in a weekly staff meeting. Next, offer as part of this training and support, you want to offer refresher trainings after the first month, maybe even again a couple months later, because most of the adoption issues show up after the initial excitement wears off. We like to take an educator mindset when we think about training, and we provide a variety of resources that accommodate different learning modalities. Some folks might appreciate a video recording, while others might prefer to read a user guide. So ideally, you're working with a vendor that has those different types of educational materials. Lastly is continuous improvement, because AI implementation is not a one and done. It's a system of policies, processes, and tools that support business operations. So as such, you should be measuring and monitoring and feeding that data into your QAPI program if appropriate. So set up a KPI dashboard and review it monthly or quarterly. Some vendors might provide this, but some agencies might like to use their own internal reporting tools, just whatever you're comfortable with. You want to collect feedback regularly, especially from the staff that is using the tool, and use those insights to optimize your workflows and inform future updates. So again, the data from the AI tools can be used to inform and track the goals you set in your QAPI program. So it's really great when all of those can connect with each other. And finally, the last real content slide here is on measurable outcomes, because agencies that implement AI documentation tools effectively are seeing clearer and measurable results. I'll give you 4 examples. The first is time efficiency, a pretty obvious one. Clinicians are saving almost 1.5 hours per day on documentation. So that's time that they can spend with patients or their families maybe. Just imagine getting back almost 35 hours a week across just a 5-person team. That's like almost gaining an extra FTE. The next is staff satisfaction. So some agencies are seeing an almost 50% increase in their staff satisfaction scores. And that's because clinicians feel more supported. They feel less rushed, and they get to focus more on patient care, which is usually why they joined the profession in the first place. So it reduces burnout. It helps with retention, especially in these high turnover environments like home health and hospice can be. Next is audit readiness. So think of AI as a prevention tool. It helps to get documentation right the first time, reducing costly downstream issues stemming from rework. The documentation compliance rates have reached 93% or higher after rollout of some tools. So that means fewer ADRs, faster claims processing, and less time spent fixing notes after the fact. Lastly, we have top line growth. So what does all of that time saved really mean in practice? For many agencies, it adds up to the ability to see more patients, often the equivalent of 1 extra visit per clinician per day. And that might not seem like a lot at first, but across a full team over time, it meaningfully expands your capacity to serve more patients and stop turning away referrals without needing to hire additional staff. And obviously, in today's workforce climate, that's a pretty big deal. So in closing, when we talk about AI, we're not just talking about flashy tech, we're talking about a new operational foundation. one that makes life easier for your team and helps your agency run smarter and grow sustainably. So if you focus on the two last things I covered, structured implementation and tie it to meaningful metrics, the returns become pretty clear and ongoing. So we'll wrap up here with the 4 key takeaways. Clinical focus, AI tools must solve real-world problems, so like documentation or the engagement and retention of clinical staff, and it should have specific workflows for intake, OASIS, and visit notes. Next is vendor evaluation. Be diligent. Use the AI checklist to evaluate vendors on compliance, accuracy, and integration. The QR code is here on the slide for you again. 3, measurable ROI. Connect your AI capabilities directly to your operational metrics like documentation time, like staff satisfaction, and your compliance scores. And then lastly, strategic implementation. So focus on a phased rollout led by clinical champions because change management is so crucial to success. And that's all that we had for you today. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a few minutes here, so we can maybe go to Denise to see if there were any questions in the chat.
Yeah, we don't have any questions yet, but I will allow people a couple more minutes. Please use that Q&A to post any questions or concerns that you'd like to have discussed here with our 2 experts on the topic. We'd be happy to have those questions from you. I just want to share really quickly with those listening in that our goal here today is to provide education on the resources that are out there and the products that are out there. CHAP doesn't specifically encourage the use of AI, nor do we endorse specifically any products. You all need to be good consumers and do your research, and that's what we're trying to do here today, is provide some information for you on how to explore these products. This is obviously up and coming. There's a lot of them out there, and we want you to have really good information on what to look for when you are shopping for a product. Our CHAP verification process does provide a review of some of these tools and looks at alignment with the CHAP standards and does add another layer of quality assurance to the products that are going through those processes. So we certainly appreciate the customers and products that are committed to that and going through that process. A couple more questions did just come in. We have a couple minutes left, so I am going to share. It said, the one question here is the AI tech built on an open source AI, or this is specific to your company, by the way, so, or did Patrium build it specifically for this purpose? So this is a question about your product in particular. It could also be a question about something a consumer would want to ask a vendor if they weren't talking to you specifically. So
Yes, so it will depend on the tool that the vendor that you're speaking with. They are built in different ways. Some might be open source, some might not. Ours is not open sourced. We think that's really important for privacy considerations. We want to make sure that we maintain control over the development of our tool. We purpose built it for home health and hospice. So we want to make sure that anyone working on that development has that use case in mind, at least at this stage in our company.
thank you. Another question here, and I think this, again, I'm going to make this a little bit more generic about integration with EMRs. And I know you mentioned APIs. So do you want to share just a little bit more information about that?
Yeah, I can take that one. So ideally, the EHR or EMR that you're working with has APIs for other vendors like ourselves or other tools you might be working with to like connect into the EHR. A lot of these tools, like the EHR is still the system of record. So you might have this AI tool that sits on top of it or works alongside it. So it needs to be able to plug in data into that system of record. APIs are ideal. It's not always enabled by the EHR or EMR. There are ways to work around that. Things like robotic process automation, AI agents can be doing some of that manual effort automatically. So it really depends on what your tool is. I think as you have conversations with vendors, if the vendor is used to working with your tool, they will have a good sense of what the potential pitfalls are and how they might need to structure their implementation to effectively work with your system. So it's very case by case basis.
Thank you. There was a question in the chat, and I'm just going to address it really quickly. It was asking if we have a list of vendors available. The quick answer is no. There are a lot of vendors out there, and we do not have a comprehensive list available. I would share the information for those on with us today. That CHAP does have a CHAP verified page, and we do list all of our companies that we've partnered with to go through that process are listed on that page. That's not just AI specific, that's policy and procedure, EMRs, and other software and educational products as well. So that is a resource, but it is not a comprehensive resource. So I do not have that available. Sue, I'm just going to share with you. Sue was asking about the rollout slide again, and if you guys want to scroll backwards, you could for Sue's benefit here, but also I'll just share that the link to the slides, a PDF version of the slides is in the Q&A, so you can access that and you can have a copy of this for yourself. There's also that AI checklist that Bianca just had up is also a separate link, full page for you to review and use with any vendors that you will be assessing for a tool that you're interested in. We are right at our time today, so I just want to say thank you to both of you for putting this together. I know you did a lot of work to put this together and bring this information to us today. Again, very helpful information for anyone that is shopping for a tool like this or just curious about the technology to see how it works. It's going, of course, to require a lot of work, as you both mentioned, and I really appreciate you stressing that this really does come down to implementation and how successful these tools are going to be, as well as not just set it and forget it. These tools have got to be, we've got to train, retrain, we've got to look at our QA, we've got to use them very carefully in the new environment as well to make sure that we are putting that patient-centered care first and foremost and meeting all the regulatory requirements. So thank you both for your time today, and thanks for all of you who joined us. Have a great day,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks.